Now, US pharmaceutical giant Pfizer says its coronavirus vaccine has been 90% effective in trials at preventing COVID-19. News that has global stock markets rejoicing. For more, we can go across to France 24's Yuka Roya. Yuka, clearly a good day for the markets. First, you have Biden's being elected US president, and now this.
Indeed, businesses and investors around the world really rejoiced at the news, especially of this vaccine trial. Even though it's just the first sign of a potential breakthrough, shares of Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech jumped on the announcement, but both rising more than 10%. But there are others that made even bigger gains than those developers of the vaccine. Shares of airlines, for instance, and cruise line operators rose 20 to 30% this Monday. And now, earlier on here in Europe, Paris's CAC 40 finished the day up more than 7%. The plane maker Airbus gained over 18%, and the bank Societe Generale also rose as much. This despite announcing 640 new job cuts. Wall Street indices touched record highs, with the Dow still up over 4%. But we have to put all of this into context. Many of these companies suffered heavy losses earlier this year due to lockdowns, and many of their shares are still worth far less than they were earlier last year. The vaccine news came, as you said, as after market sentiment was already lifted by Joe Biden's victory in the US presidential election. Here's one New Yorker speaking about the mood today on Wall Street. Let's take a listen.
The economy will come back because people will start to be normal again. And I think for a long time, people were not normal. And I think that this falsity in why the economy got great and then crashed all of a sudden will come back to normal. I mean, hopefully we have someone in office who can, help us get rid of the COVID crisis and bring jobs back. I mean, it's not like people are not working because they don't want to. They're having a tough time going to work.
Now, Yuka, there is some hope, if you will, that Joe Biden will act to bring the U.S. economy back on its feet by containing the pandemic.
That's right. Well, there's certainly hope that a Biden government will patch some of the damage inflicted by the Trump administration, especially in areas such as foreign trade policies and relations. But Biden's priorities are first and foremost on the domestic front. With more than 11 million Americans out of work, the job crisis is, of course, atop of the agenda. Now, the Biden-Harris campaign unveiled a transition plan over the weekend, which the president-elect says is for working American families. And he promises to make millions of well-paying, good-paying jobs and make it easier for workers to organize unions, for instance, and bargain collectively. Now, he wants to boost manufacturing and help small businesses to make the U.S. Supply chain less dependent on foreign countries. He says the government will make investments into clean energy, but also into modernizing infrastructure. He also plans to raise salaries for care workers and teachers and address racial injustice in terms of the economy as well, to try and close the wealth gap as well. The Biden administration will, of course, run into resistance in Congress, as the U.S. Senate will likely remain under Republican control. But global investors are actually welcoming this prospect, as that could hinder any drastic policy changes that could add to U.S. public debt.
And finally, from you, Yuka, with less than 2 months left before a post-Brexit transition period, the European Union has resumed trade talks with the UK.
That's right. Well, if you remember, Britain left the European Union back in January of this year. But for now, it remains in the bloc's single market and customs union. That's until the transition period, as you mentioned, expires on the 31st of December. Now, the latest round of talks began this Monday in London to try and find some common ground, as the two sides still have significant differences on things like fishing quotas and competition. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Sunday said that the outlines of an agreement were clear, and Finance Minister Rishi Sunak followed up on that this Monday. He sounded confidence that a deal can be done, saying a significant progress has been made in the negotiation. However, he also said that Britain would no longer wait for Brussels to decide on how British firms could access the EU market, and set out its own plan for ways the UK would let European financial firms operate in Britain from next year. If there is no agreement at the end of this year on the 31st of December, then trade between the two sides will default to rules set by the WTO, World Trade Organization, which would mean that import and export tariffs will kick in.
Yuka, thank you very much for that. Yuka Royer there with today's business news. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. More coming up. This is France 24.